In this sixth episode of Let's Talk, Bernard Conlon talks about the dramatic changes that have happened globally that influence Europe's policies on immigration and opened a Pandora's box. Again, more recently with, I think slightly before the Brexit election, I could be wrong, but we started to see mass migration from third world countries who were trying to escape their poverty. We'd had the Arab Spring, where all of a sudden certain dictators were being overturned, their economies again being crashed. In the Middle East, and people trying to escape the tyranny of those countries, trying to find hope in Europe. So how did that influence things?
Well, to go back to what I said about the history of the European Union, I arrived there in 1986 and I had a ringside seat on this incredible evolution. Maybe evolution is too gentle a word, but within the European institutional fabric, change and evolution was through treaties and high politics and abstract politics at a very high political level and in a European institutional level. Whereas a lot of the other changes were very dramatic. The Berlin Wall coming down, the collapse of the Soviet Union, as I said, enlargement of the European Union in 2004. But then the financial crisis, basically in 2008, almost shook the Western world to its very foundations. It questioned the whole feasibility and potential viability of capitalism for the first time. The whole notion of free market economies had become almost like a dogma, or had become a sort of orthodoxy. And the financial crisis showed that there were fundamental structural problems. So the events were becoming more unpredictable and the outcomes were becoming more turbulent. But you also had the interventions and the wars that were going on. I mean, you've seen the rise of fundamental Islam. You've seen 2000, the events of 2001. I think it was with the World Trade Center, that fundamentally changed American perspectives on things. And as a result of that, and prior to that, you had a lot of Western interventions in Arab countries. And you had the reaction to that. And the most obviously there was the American intervention in Afghanistan, but the war in Iraq, when George Bush and Tony Blair decided that they were going to overthrow Saddam Hussein, they got involved in a huge intervention that did not get the support of the international community, or in fact was contrary to international law, but it went ahead nonetheless. It was fudged and proceeded with, and it opened up Pandora's box again that we're still living with. The outcome of that war, probably even more so than the intervention in Afghanistan, has generated consequences that we're still witnessing the outplaying of. You had the more gentle evolution of the European Union at a quiet political, institutional kind of level, but all these dramatic economic changes taking place, and unfortunately wars. The Arab Spring, which was it was aspired that the Middle East might just become like the rest of the West, have liberal democratic regimes, but didn't quite work out like that. And we also witness now the whole situation in Syria, and that is a quagmire and a Pandora's box that none of us know what the precise outcome of that will be. And so the Middle East has been hugely destabilised, and that has generated huge movements of people from the Middle East, and it's opened up economic migration from countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan and all of those countries that have been destabilised. Africa, which is 1 billion people, and if we look at it seriously, there's no real society or economy in somewhere like Africa, and all of these poor people that are living in I suppose semi-dysfunctional countries, they all aspire, like all of us do, they aspire to have a good life, and they aspire to have their children getting education, and all of a sudden, because of mass communications, they think there's a better life to be had in places like Europe.
And we have, as you say, 1 billion people in Africa, 1 billion people in 1.3 billion in China, something similar in India. In fact, I think India is probably taking over. So that's at least nearly half the population of the planet, and yet America is eating up maybe 50% of the resources, and there's only 275.
It's 370 million.
370 million, yeah. So a small percentage, about 10%, and yet they're eating up all the resources and things. So what about how do you see the changes that have happened in the West with Trump now being there and Brexit? How's that having an impact?
Well, Brexit is a big subject. I've written an article. I tried to reflect on Brexit. I've written some stuff for an educational publisher in the UK, doing a textbook for A-level students. And if you try to put yourself in the mind of school students, you're actually trying to think about something, putting yourself in the mind of an A-level student doing A-level politics. You have to try to see a sequence of events and explain things pretty rationally. The problem, I think, with the West, and I mainly mean Western Europe, the European Union and North America, is that they've reacted to events. Recently they've been reacting to events. The whole relationship between United States and Europe, with Africa, with South America, and with other what was referred to as the Third World, even since the Second World War, has been a mixed bag. On some levels, the West has provided economic aid and has tried and has given independence to a lot of countries, but also a lot of the relationship has been based on some degree of exploitation and manipulation. And the relationships between the West and some of the leaderships in some of these countries. For example, there were a lot of military dictatorships in South America that were supported and propped up. And there was a lot of economic self-interest on the part of the West that manifested itself in the relationships with the former colonies in Africa, or between United States and Latin America. So a lot of distortion, and in many ways, I guess we always think that things will continue as they are, but the old laws of physics say that every action has a reaction. And for quite a few generations in the wake of the Second World War, there was an unbalanced and an unhealthy relationship between the West and big parts of the Third World. And what has happened, that has to some extent exploded. There's now just mass migration. The European Union at this moment are trying to tackle the migration issue, and they're not succeeding. And Italy is one of the countries at the cold face of that. And the EU is trying to cobble together a coherent policy. But it should have done that 20, 30 years ago. Their relationship with Africa should have been configured properly 30 years ago. A partnership with Africa, with the former colonies of Britain and France and Belgium, should have been properly configured 30 years ago. The uneven and distorted relationships between the West have festered, and in the last decade, in this new millennium, they've exploded. And the multiple problems that we're witnessing now are the outcome of that.
We have more on the way, so please subscribe to this channel and check out the link below if you'd consider becoming a patron to help us keep making more content. Thanks for watching.